12. The canal boat bobbed along Undis's waterways, its man-made tributaries crisscrossing throughout the city, stitching the islands together. Travel along them was restricted to merchants and the social elite, not by decree, but by the weight of commerce or social standing. Towpaths ran in parallel with the waterways, their industrial use long since forgotten. Now they connected the districts, each a cluster of buildings on their own miniature islands. Here in the tideway, the roar of the maelstrom that sat beneath Undis's citadel thrummed through the air. Cal sat rigid at the prow of George's oversized canal boat. He'd again raided George's wardrobe, this time claiming a long black coat that hugged his frame but left room to move. The perfumed leather itched at his nostrils, a small price to pay for the disguise and the modicum of protection it provided. To any observer, he'd look like some noble's hired blade, the kind too paranoid to trust the prefects. A scuffle erupted on the nearest island. Several prefects, their armor darker than that of igneous, hues of blue and silver, dragged two shopkeepers into the streets, hurling them onto the white cobblestones. Other citizens knelt, their hands behind their heads or pressed to their faces like shields. Cal stood, foot on the lip of the canal boat, ready to jump. The gap was still too wide, but closing. Don't, Shay barked, watching the display of organized brutality. Her eyes weren't alight with the same fire as Cal's. Hers burned with hatred and contempt. If you get involved, you'll only make it worse for them. So I just sit here and watch it happen? Just like everyone else? He jerked his chin toward the faces crowding every window, silent witnesses. Yes. Her tone was clipped, the word pushed out rather than said. Cal turned away with a scoff. Sometimes saving the day only makes the next one worse. Cal shut his eyes, but the shopkeeper's pleas swelled as the boat drew closer. His whole body trembled with the need to do something, every fiber demanding action. But his chest burned with the realization that he could do nothing. Prefects have stepped up their patrols in the district, George murmured, barely audible over the distant din of the maelstrom. Any association, even a neighborly rumor, is being treated as full treason. This does not bode well for the hideout. Quentin's or my father's? Shay asked, a challenge to her tone. Both, George said frankly. My father placed the illusion around the hideout himself. There's no way the average prefect would be able to find it. Not on their own, no, countered George. Our little rebellion is losing its foothold in the city, hideouts and hearts alike. The rebellion is crumbling. A single slip, a cornered ally, a loose tongue. It's over. Shay looked down, her expression dour, her brow furrowed. We're wasting time, Cal snapped. If what George says is correct, then we need to hurry. George nodded and vanished into the cabin. The boat lurched forward, its sudden speed making Cal sway. He glanced back one last time. A prefect dragged an older-looking shopkeeper away by his collar. The man was in the twilight years of his life, judging by his graying hairs and almost comically bushy mustache. Cal's chest dropped as he surveyed the brutality, and he offered the man a silent apology, lamenting the piece of himself that fell away. Then he turned away, fists clenched, wrinkling his nose at the perfumed leather of his coat. The moment George's boots hit the damp cobblestone, Cal shifted into action. He didn't sprint and scramble like his colleague. Urgent didn't mean careless after all. George skidded to a halt in the smashed entrance of a tavern. Rotten wood and broken window panes lined the outside, Some newer, with shards of glass littering the ground beneath them, others older, lined with white dots of dried sea salt. Cal joined him in the doorway. The stench hit first. In some ways, it smelled like any other lower city tavern: ale, sweat, an honest day's work mixed with an honest evening's brawl. But a brawl didn't leave the scent of iron in the air. It didn't leave the flooring, the stools, or the wet bar covered in blood. Jord gagged, pressing a perfumed glove to his nose, but Cal stepped past him. The room was a slaughterhouse. Overturned stools, blood smeared in arcs where the dying had crawled, the drip of ale from a spilled tankard punctuating the silence. Cal inspected the first corpse, a precise cut across the throat. Professional. Clean. The next was messier, a gut wound, the victim's fingers clenching his own entrails. Near the back room, the kills changed. Clothing fused to blackened skin, faces, well groomed and lacking the pale hue of prolonged malnourishment, locked in silent screams. Their brands still glowed faintly under cracked flesh. Cal closed the eyes of the more destitute looking corpses and passed a scornful gaze over the others. Shay slipped in behind him, her careful footfalls avoiding the stickiest patches. She didn't flinch or react as Jord had. "Are we too late?" she asked, though her tone said she already knew the answer. Cal didn't answer. He tracked the puncture marks in the walls. Thin, precise, angular. Blade strikes. Not a brawl. A massacre. A dull thud came from the back room. Cal's jagged blade cleared its sheath before the sound faded. He kicked the door open and found a boy, younger than Artie if the wisps of hair on his chin were any indication. Blood soaked through his clothes, and he struggled to breathe under the corpse that lay on top of him, the pointed end of a blade sticking through its back. Cal helped the dying boy free, and he took in a long breath, punctuated by a series of fitful wet coughs. The blackened skin of his right hand cracked like splintered wood as he coughed, the pulsing of his brand fading. "Shay!" Cal called out, wiping the man's mouth. He didn't have long left. The boy's lips moved, blood burbling. "Quentin. He—" "Where is he? Where's Quentin?" Cal frowned as the young man jerked and gasped for air. "He saw—" The words died in the man's throat. His gaze lost its focus as his head slumped forward. "No," Cal whispered, closing the boy's eyes. He didn't look up as he heard Shay appear behind him. "Is he—" Shay asked, her tone matching her grim expression. "He's gone." Cal laid the dead man down on the floor and sheathed the jagged blade. "This wasn't your fault, Cal. Nothing anyone could have done," Shay said, trying her best to sound empathetic and practical all at once. "We should have gotten here sooner." Cal didn't look at Shay when he answered. He knew his answer wasn't realistic. Knew that if they'd gotten here in time, they'd likely be among the dead. But the fact didn't make him feel any better. Didn't make the guilt easier to bear. Another life had been lost because Cal wasn't fast enough. "We need to be careful. Chances are the place is still being watched," Shay continued, ignoring Cal's comment, not giving air to his pity party. George stumbled in, his face pale, perfumed glove still held to his nose. "I can't find Quentin. He's not among the bodies," he blurted out. "Is there anywhere he might be?" Shay asked. George's gaze fell on the dead boy. "I knew this boy. DeWitt something. He didn't deserve this. None of them deserved this." He turned, wobbling slightly as he made his way outside. Cal and Shay followed, neither of them surprised when George doubled over and retched. It's okay, Jord. Shay rubbed his back gently, softening her tone. If Quentin isn't here, then he might still be alive. We can still help him. But you need to tell us where he might be. Think. Cal's tone wasn't as soft as Shay's, and his remark earned him a sideways glance from her. I'm okay, George said, holding his arm out and pushing Shay away. I know where Quentin will have gone. I've a warehouse a few streets from here. He pointed in the direction of the swell, the back end of the Tideway district. It houses the trinkets I picked up in my travels. It's where we'd go to be alone. Together. Cal gave Jorda a curt nod. Keep up, and sprinted off in the direction of the swell. Cal crouched at the alleyway's mouth, knees pressing into damp cobbles as he waited for Shay and Jord. His gaze locked onto a small unit of prefects, 4 of them in total, studying their formation as they guarded the warehouse. He tilted his head, straining to hear any sound from the warehouse. Sounds of struggle, the lash of gift fire. Nothing. The warehouse loomed silently. The wrong kind of silence. Shay skidded into a crouch next to Cal, George stumbling behind, his breath heavy. And anything? Shay asked, taking in the scene. Nothing. Simple guard formation. I count 4 so far. Likely more inside, Cal replied. Shay turned to Jord, her hand steadying his trembling shoulder as he fought to quiet his heaving breaths. How many entrances to this place are there? Front and back, Jord panted. It's too quiet. We need to hurry. He moved to exit the alley, but Cal shoved him into the wall. Not yet, Cal whispered with a grunt. We're wasting time just sitting here, Jord protested, his face flushed crimson from frustration or embarrassment. Cal didn't care why. He knew diving in without much of a plan would be suicide. Exactly what the Davins wanted. Something about this whole thing felt off. The prefect stood too still. No shifting feet, no bored chatter. Bait. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he eyed the nearby rooftops, scanning for hidden assailants. Jord, we need to be careful, Shay said, her tone soft again. We need to make sure we don't do this half-cocked. Something feels off about this whole thing. What are you talking about? Shay didn't answer. Her gaze drifted back to Cal. There were some things a soft voice and gentle touch weren't suited for conveying. Do you trust Quentin? Cal asked, his gaze still arrow-focused on the prefects ahead. George swallowed hard. With my life, Cal. Cal turned to Jord, studied his earnestness, the desperation, the loyalty, and exhaled hard. All right, fine. If we're doing this, then we're doing it fast. He snapped his head toward Shay. I could buy you both a few minutes. Make sure our friends over there have something to play with. Meanwhile, you get in, get Quentin, and get out. I'll join you when I'm done. You sure you're not going to need my help? Shay replied. Cal shook his head and jerked his chin toward Jord. He'll need it more. Shay gave a single, slow nod as her response. All right. See you on the other side, handsome. Cal allowed the corner of his mouth to curl into the barest smirk. As always. Shay's brand ignited, mottled gray gift slithering up at her arm like smoke. When the shadows swallowed them whole, Cal drew his blades and stepped into the light. His grip tightened on the hilts, and he welcomed the familiar pre-fight buzz as it thrummed in his veins. Oi!